Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video and talk about this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And of course, we're now only a couple of weeks away, I believe, officially from that of the Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Bud Crawford fight. And I believe that probably a little bit less because I think today is Monday. It's about 3 a.m. in the morning here, But, anyways, point is that this fight is very, very close on the horizon. But of course, I've seen many fight predictions, and I thought that this little video right here was very particularly interesting. And this little video right here, I believe, is by the YouTube channel known as HITMAN Sports Media. I don't think that I've ever seen this channel before, but I have seen some of his more recent videos and his fight predictions, and I believe that he's going with that of a Terence Bud Crawford. And not only is he going with that of a Terence Bud Crawford, but he's going with that of a Terence Bud Crawford by that of stoppage or by that of knockout. Now, I've already stated this. I am slightly going with Canelo Alvarez in this fight because I believe that his combined skill set with his size will be a little bit too much, especially for a Crawford that has never fought at that particular weight class before. And also, I don't really know how good Terence Bud Crawford is also going to be. I know that Canelo Alvarez definitely has seen better years for sure, but I mean, Terence Bud Crawford, to be quite fair, I think that he's also seen better years. He's going to be 38 years old around, when this fight happens. And on top of that, he's also a guy that has not fought in about 14 months. Excuse me. And then on top of that, if he gains a little bit too much weight, he may not necessarily see as many advantages as what he wants. I'm not expecting Terence Bud Crawford to come in at around 180 or 185, but if he does, in my view, that pretty much will kill a lot of his chances to possibly win this fight, just in my personal view. I expect him to be more around 170 to 175, maybe 175. But even then, that still is going to be a little bit more weight that Terence Bud Crawford is used to carrying. And then, of course, that brings in the question, if you don't gain a certain amount of weight, will the power really affect Canelo Alvarez to that great of a degree? Because Canelo Alvarez at times is not afraid to get in there when he really needs to, in order to really get the job done. But anyways, excuse me. But that being stated, of course, this man right here, he's going to state some of his points as to why he believes that Canelo Alvarez is going to get stopped in the fight. Do I believe that that's going to happen? No, I do not. I think that Canelo is just a little bit too sturdy, someone that is a little bit too, good of a fighter. And on top of that, someone who's just, has too good of a chin. I just don't see how Canelo Alvarez is more than likely going to get stopped by that of a Terence Bud Crawford, especially seeing Terence Bud Crawford in his most recent performance against Madrimov. And I do understand that Madrimov has, or Madrimov, whatever his name is, I understand that he has quicker feet, but he's also someone that is a decent amount smarter than Canelo at this point in time in his career. And he's also someone that, is not the pedigree of a Canelo. He's someone that's a very good fighter, but I don't think is an A-plus level skilled fighter. But that being stated, let's get into the video. Let's see what the man has to state. I thought, of course, that it was very particularly interesting. Let's get straight into it.
What's going on, you guys? So we're 2 weeks out from the big fight, Crawford versus Canelo. And this has been a fight that, I've talked about for some time, really ever since it was announced. And I'm excited for it, man. As time gets closer, the more excited I'm getting. But also as time gets closer, the more I'm starting to lean toward a Crawford stoppage. I've been doing some studying on, both fighters, really.
Let me just state this very quickly. Everyone says that when they break down a fight that they study and that, they study hard and all sorts of stuff. But it's not necessarily about how much you study always. It's about, do you really know what to look at, and can you tell which factors are going to be more important in the fight? That's why, for example, when I take a look at Dante's Boxing Nation, and I remember when he was breaking down the Naoya Inoue versus Stephen Fulton fight, he said that in his personal view, that he thought that Stephen Fulton was just going to dominate Inoue, and I actually predicted Fulton to win that fight as well, because I was not sure how Inoue would react to a type of style like that. But of course, Inoue proved both of us wrong by showing off, his skill set with flying colors. But the point is that I knew that fight was going to be potentially, a fight that could have went either way. Inoue ended up dominating him, which is certainly not something that I expected in that type of way. But Dante's Boxing Nation, of course, the way that he was taking a look at it is that, well, I see Nonito Donaire at times hitting, Naoya Inoue at will. So I assume that Stephen Fulton more than likely is going to be able to do the same thing. And you cannot just compare performances on the surface like that, because you have to expect at times that a fighter is going to fight a certain fighter differently, especially, if they took a look at them as they were a different type of level. In a way, of course, took a look at Donaire at that point in time as someone that probably was very good, but someone that was a little bit past it. When he took a look at Fulton, he took him 100% seriously because he knew that that was going to be the biggest fight of his career, and it showed. He moved around a lot better. He changed levels to a much better degree, and he was someone that was much more on his toes compared to that of a Donaire fight where it was obvious that he was expecting to knock Donaire out probably within the first 6 rounds, but it didn't happen like that. But anyways, point is that many people will take a look at certain things on the surface, and although of course it's okay to take a look at certain things from certain fights, you have to know, if that is going to be relevant for this fight.
But I've been studying Canelo's last few fights, on top of seeing everything I've been seeing, in him in training camp, preparing for Crawford. I'm not impressed, man. And I've known that Canelo's had holes in his game for quite some time. If you're a real hardcore boxing fan, you know that footwork has been, one of Canelo's flaws throughout his whole entire career, right? Even when people wanted to say he was in his quote-unquote prime, he had footwork.
Yes, I agree. Canelo Alvarez is someone that is never going to have elite level feet. But that being stated, Canelo Alvarez has good enough feet in order to get the job done. And Canelo Alvarez actually has a factor that may actually be more important than that of elite feet, and that is great upper body movement. Now, that being stated, can having great feet at times, win you the fight, especially over great upper body movement? It can at certain times, but Canelo Alvarez, of course, is one of the few exceptions. He pretty much is the only all-time grade level fighter that I've seen that I would claim probably does not have great feet, but because he's so exceptional in many other categories, he's been able to be successful even against fighters that are bigger than him, or A-grade level fighters, or fighters that even do have good feet like a Golovkin or a Lara or certain fighters like that. But the thing is about Canelo Alvarez is that he has good enough feet. Sometimes he does cross his feet, and at times he definitely can be flat-footed, and he definitely doesn't have the quickest of feet, but he is someone that at times, or oftentimes more than that, will have the right foot positioning. And he has learned how to take smaller steps, which of course is a key basic in boxing, to make sure that, your opponents are not catching you off guard. And Canelo, of course, fixed that a little bit after the Dimitri Bivol fight, which of course was a key factor in the Jamel Charlo fight. But Canelo Alvarez, in terms of his main faults, the main faults that he really has, at least the main glaring ones, of course, are his feet, and also that of his stamina, at least at his absolute worst. But other than that, it's really hard to really pick apart many major faults in Canelo Alvarez's game. We can kind of pick apart maybe some, slight ones here and there, like he hasn't always had the best defense against the jab. He's someone that, at times can be a bit front foot heavy, but that kind of goes into the feet criticism, so it is what it is. And then maybe another one, at times he can move around maybe a little bit too much without, countering. But, Canelo Alvarez will take charge usually when he needs to, at least, kind of at this point in time in his career, or at least during his best years. I don't think he's at his best years anymore, but he is someone overall that still, will do enough to win the fight. That being stated, when I also take a look at Terence Crawford, he's someone that, in my personal view, that him and Canelo, they're about on the same level in terms of all-around ability, and I know that many people would not agree with that. But Terence Crawford is not someone that is completely flawless in his style either. He does not have an elite level defense. He is someone that can be hit to a certain degree repeatedly. We've seen that against Sean Porter and Madrimov and Aegis Kavalauskas, Yuriorkis Gamboa, and multiple other fights as well. He's someone that, I'm not going to claim that he's chinny, but he's not someone that has an all-time grade level chin. If you hit him flush, especially multiple times, you can possibly hurt him. We've seen that against Gamboa. We've seen that against, I believe, what was his name? Aegis Kavalauskas. And I've seen it in, a couple of other fights as well, where he was kind of a little bit rocked or a little bit hurt. And I don't know if Crawford is going to be able to handle the level of power that Canelo is going to throw his way. But we'll see.
Issues. Alongside stamina issues. He hasn't had the best gas tank, in the sport. When he was completely roided out of his mind against Golovkin, he faded late. We saw that in the first fight. Right?
Well, the first fight I can guarantee that Canelo Alvarez was on steroids. What we do know for sure is that after the first fight that Canelo Alvarez that he definitely was caught on steroids. But I mean, Canelo's stamina did appear to be better in that of the second fight. Now, could that possibly be because he's on something? I mean, it's a very high possibility. But I also think that Canelo Alvarez, whether he's on steroids or not, I think that he's learned how to pace himself, become a very accurate fighter, and someone that knows how to kind of, maneuver around his rhythm, and someone that, is someone that kind of knows how to pace himself to the point to where he's not going to tire out as much as what he once did. Which is why in certain fights, even against Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders or Sergey Kovalev or certain fights like that, he didn't necessarily always tire out. Now, that being stated, that was more Canelo Alvarez at his peak years. It's going to be a little bit hard to tell because I don't think Canelo Alvarez is at his absolute peak anymore. But that being stated, Canelo Alvarez, even in his most recent fights, I just don't think that he's tired out enough, in my personal view, in my view, for it to be a major factor. Unless Canelo Alvarez, of course, is just chasing Terence Crawford around the whole entire, time, and Crawford is actually able to land many effective punches throughout the fight. Assuming that Crawford may not potentially tire out with the power and overall the extra size that he may, try to, put upon himself, or the extra size that he may try to add. And then on top of that, dealing with the power of a Canelo Alvarez. So we'll see. But that being stated, Canelo Alvarez is someone, excuse me, at times that has faded out, but I do not expect Canelo Alvarez to fade out as much as what he did, say, in the Mayweather or the Bivol fight, as those are pretty much the only two fights that I've ever seen Canelo Alvarez fade out like that. And I just don't know if Canelo Alvarez is going to fade out like that when he's fighting a fighter that has never fought at that weight class before. I don't know if the power is going to be impactful enough. And then on top of that, Crawford is someone that can be a bit hittable and can be hurt. Now, I do expect both Crawford and Canelo Alvarez to be better versions of themselves for this fight than what they usually are. But that being stated, that does not change the fact that Crawford is still moving up in weight a couple of weight classes. And I don't think Canelo is a natural super middleweight, but he at the very least is a natural middleweight. And Terence Bud Crawford, I am going to wonder how he handles that level of power once he starts feeling it. If Canelo, of course, is able to get to him consistently.
We've seen it get very fatigued in the Bivol fight.
We did see him get very fatigued in the Bivol fight, and a lot of people are taking a look at the Bivol fight, but this has always been my point about the Bivol fight. I don't know if I can just take a look at the Bivol fight and just state, oh, well, Bivol did all these things against Canelo Alvarez, and Canelo Alvarez looked terrible in the Bivol fight, so Crawford is going to be able to utilize everything or most of the things that Bivol was able to do. There might be certain things that Crawford can take advantage of. But Bivol was also a natural light heavyweight. He's someone that, never really should have been fighting someone like a Canelo Alvarez in the first place. Bivol was able to set Canelo Alvarez completely off balance with his lead hand, not only because Canelo Alvarez was so front foot heavy, but also because he just had the level of size and power to do that. And then on top of that, Canelo Alvarez was someone that very clearly was affected by the power and the size of a Dimitri Bivol, which is why he was backing up in that fight and up against the ropes for a good majority of the fight. And then on top of that, the added extra muscle mass that Canelo tried to add on so he could compete with Bivol's size and power, it clearly impacted him. But I don't think Canelo Alvarez is going to be doing that for this fight, and I just don't see him getting tired out in this fight the way that he did against Dimitri Bivol, unless, of course, Crawford is able to go to the body consistently and actually able to affect Canelo Alvarez. And then on top of that, he's able to frustrate Canelo by moving around the ring very, very swiftly, which Crawford, of course, can move around the ring very, very swiftly. But once again, I also think that the power is going to have to be effective enough. Is it going to be effective enough? I think that Canelo can probably feel his power, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to keep Canelo Alvarez off of him. But we'll see.
And then the latest one that, caught my attention when I was studying it, right, was the Jaime Munguia fight. The reason for that was just how hard he actually faded late in the...
Well, Canelo Alvarez faded a little bit in that fight, but I don't think overall that the fading was really as much, as what some people state. And in my personal view, I've watched that fight, I believe, at least 2 times. Both times I scored that fight 9-3 for Canelo Alvarez. And I believe that 2 out of the 3 judges had it around there as well. So, I mean, that's a relatively accurate scorecard. And to be honest with you, Canelo still landed, I believe, about 50% of his power punches. He threw over 500 punches and landed a total of 44% for the fight. And Jaime Munguia was absolutely humongous compared to Canelo Alvarez. And he's someone overall that also was a great power puncher. Yet he only landed 26% of his punches. And that's actually on the higher end of what opponents usually land on Canelo. And that was a Canelo that was slower and not quite the same fighter as what he once was. But yet he still was pretty much able to school that of a Jaime Munguia. I'm not claiming that there was not moments that Canelo did not fade in the fight, but I just don't know if I see a Canelo Alvarez that is just going to completely fade out against Terence Bud Crawford unless he's just completely aged out to the point to where there's a little bit more wear and tear that I haven't seen on him, within his past couple of fights. But we'll see, which is very possible because he very clearly has been a little bit more on the downhill trend for the past few years, but we'll see.
Fight. And I did a YouTube short and had people going crazy.
And to compare Canelo's last fight, or to compare his fight, say, against a Jaime Munguia, for example, to like an Israel Madrimov, when Terence Bud Crawford fought that of an Israel Madrimov, or whatever his name is, now one could debate that Madrimov is better than Jaime Munguia. I mean, I would probably state that Madrimov is a smarter fighter, maybe slightly more talented, but in my view, they're around on the same level. They're both around A-minus level fighters. I would claim that, in my personal view, that Madrimov is probably more talented. But that being stated, Jaime Munguia was at the point in his career to where you could debate that he was a legit A-minus level fighter. And Munguia landed 26% of his punches, Canelo landed 44. Crawford, in comparison to Madrimov, with his first move up to 154, now Madrimov was feinting a lot and he was using his feet quite a bit, so I understand that Crawford was having a very tough time landing in comparison. But Terence Bud Crawford is not someone that is quite as accurate as what a lot of people, like to think that he is. He was extremely accurate in both the Errol Spence and the Yuriorkis Gamboa fights. But if you take a look at some of his other bigger fights, like against Postal or Sean Porter or Aegis Kavalaskas or Israel Madrimov, he's not someone that is quite as accurate as what you may think. And against Israel Madrimov, he only landed, I believe, about 22% of his punches. He threw about 433 punches, and he didn't even land 1/4 of his punches. He only landed, I believe, about 22%. Madrimov landed about 31%. So what I will personally state is this: Crawford is someone that is very accurate. He is not a defensively great fighter. And on top of that, he's someone that is very accurate, but he's not quite as accurate as what certain people, kind of like to lead on about him. He's not someone that is a Floyd Mayweather. And let me also state this: there's only one fighter that I've ever seen in the history of Canelo's career that has ever even landed close to 50%. And I do believe that Crawford is going to have that type of performance more than likely to beat Canelo Alvarez. I mean, I could be wrong. We'll see. There's a possibility that Crawford maybe could circle around Canelo, kind of what Sugar Ray Leonard did to Marvin Hagler, especially with the time off maybe being of help to him because it refreshed him. We'll see. I don't know. Could be a disadvantage as well. But, maybe Crawford could make it look like the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler fight, where he at least throws more volume, at times lands, the more impactful punches, and just frustrates Canelo to where Canelo's not able to land anything mainly impactful. That's pretty much how I seen the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler fight, where Hagler made it competitive in moments, but I still thought he lost 8 rounds to 4 to Sugar Ray Leonard. If Crawford wins the fight, it's more than likely going to be by that. I just don't see how Crawford wins this fight by stoppage. But I could see him winning a fight similar to that of how Sugar Ray Leonard, beat Marvin Hagler. That's pretty much the only way that I'd see him beating Canelo Alvarez. But if Canelo wins this fight, it's probably going to look very similar to that of the Jamel Charlo fight, except he might even be able to get the stoppage. But we'll see.
Little fanboys go crazy anytime you criticize Canelo Alvarez.
But let me also state this once again. The only person that I've ever seen land 50% on Canelo was Floyd Mayweather. I don't think a lot of people realize how great defensively Canelo Alvarez is. When you take a look at the defensive statistics of other fighters when they land on him, like even supremely accurate punchers like Dimitri Bivol against Artur Beterbiev, and they're the same size. Now, one could debate that, Artur Beterbiev is an easier target to hit because he's someone that doesn't always have the most excellent upper body movement, and he's someone that's a bigger target. But also what I'll state is this: I think a lot of people get the impression that Canelo Alvarez is just this super hittable dude, and he's really not. When you take a look at the Arts of Beterbiev fights, Bivol, landed, I believe, about 30-something% of his punches. Against Canelo Alvarez, he literally landed about 10% less. He landed only 21% of his shots. Munguia landed 26. I believe Danny Jacobs landed around like 23. Caleb Plant landed around 21, something like that. Gennady Golovkin even was in the very low accuracy percentage. Arasani Lara didn't even land 30% when he usually lands 50%. There's only one fighter in the history of the game that I believe that has ever even landed the majority of their shots against Canelo Alvarez, and that's been Floyd Mayweather. So like I said, we'll see. And Crawford is someone that's a phenomenal level fighter, but I don't think that he's quite the fighter of what a Floyd Mayweather was. I think that both Canelo and Crawford are about a level below. But that being stated, we'll see.
And in this YouTube short I posted, if you guys go on and look at it, I highlighted just all the body shots that Jaime Munguia was landing, just to show that that's the real reason Canelo Alvarez wasn't able to stop him. It's not because, that's his friend and he really liked, Jaime Munguia and, that's his Mexican countryman and, he wanted to take...
Well, what I'll personally state is this. I do think that some of the body shots had a little bit of an effect on Canelo. There might be some people that would debate that Canelo went a little bit less on him as the fight went along. But in my personal view, that also is a little bit of an excuse. Listen, it's just obvious that Canelo at this point in time in his career that he's just not going to be able to get stoppages, at least very consistently. That's just how it is. That's how it is when fighters get older. Manny Pacquiao was very similar. Pacquiao was stopping a lot of guys. He stopped Ricky Hatton. He stopped Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, Miguel Cotto. He stopped many guys. And then, there was just one day to where he still had the power and he was still very dangerous. He was still very lethal, but he just wasn't getting stoppages anymore. It happens with every fighter. It's okay. It is what it is. I mean, unless you're someone that just has, phenomenal level power to where you have like, Deontay Wilder or Mike Tyson or Rocky Marciano type power or something like that. But I think Canelo is about a level below those guys in terms of punching power. So I mean, the thing is that when we take a look at it, Gennady Golovkin, of course, another one as well. But, on the elite level up there with the Wilder and some of those other guys. But anyways, the point is that, when we take a look at it, Canelo, I think that he was just fighting a bigger guy, someone that was pretty massive against him. He had to conserve himself. And on top of that, I mean, Canelo still won the fight very clearly. In my personal view, that was a 9-rounds-to-3 fight. I would say that, this guy's point would be a little bit more relevant if Munguia made it a 7-rounds-to-5 fight or if it was a fight that could have went either way. But I just don't know how you see that fight, being that close.
It easy on little brother Jaime, big brother Canelo, he didn't want to hurt Jaime. He was just in there sparring, playing around, Jaime was the one really fighting, he didn't want to ruin Jaime's career. Just all the stupid narratives you see throughout YouTube.
You can tell that this guy's getting very frustrated by a lot of the Canelo Alvarez fan base. He also kind of comes across to me as a Terence Crawford fan, but I could be wrong about that, but this guy seems like he really wants Terence Crawford to win. And I mean, that's up to him, but once again, I don't overall ever get my emotions mixed up in my fight analyses.
Comment sections, right? Complete stupid takes. The dumbest narratives you can possibly think of. Anytime you go in there into a fight, right? And you are playing around, those are the times you get hurt.
Well, at times. Sometimes overall, there are examples of a fighter carrying another fighter. Sometimes you can tell that, overall that they're very clearly, kind of having a little bit more fun in there. But of course, there are times, to where a fighter does end up getting knocked out or hurt, when that fighter does play around a little bit. Like, for example, Tyson Fury, in my view, in the third Deontay Wilder fight, he was, I'm not going to say going easy on Wilder, but he was kind of mixing it up to a degree to where, he was making it a little bit less dominant. I could be wrong about that. But there are certain times, where you can tell that an all-time great level fighter, that they clearly carry that fighter a little bit, either because they were told to by the promoter, or on top of that, because they really want to punish them and kind of embarrass them and outbox them, or on top of that, because they just want to have a little bit of fun and they don't feel that challenged.
I don't think...
Do I believe the Canelo versus Munguia fight was of that? No, I think that Canelo was in the ring against a guy who was massive compared to his size, someone that also was becoming a very decent boxer and someone who could legitimately punch. And Canelo knew that he had to pace himself very well, that he pretty much had to be very patient, that he, I'm going to give this kid, a couple of the early rounds. He's going to get a little bit too hyped up, a little bit too overly aggressive, and then I'm going to hit him with something.
Canelo was just playing around, letting him hit. Him, letting Jaime Munguia hit him with 5-piece combinations throughout the whole entire fight. I don't think...
Right, but I don't think Munguia was hitting them legitly with 5-piece combinations. I think that a lot of those shots were landing on elbows and forearms and gloves, which is why Jaime Munguia, once again, he threw over 600 punches, but, he threw 100 more punches than Canelo Alvarez, actually more than that, and he still only landed 26% of his blows. So once again, it shows you how great defensively Canelo Alvarez is, and also still how impactful his power is, because, overall, he still was able to knock Jaime Munguia on his ass and push him back at times and keep him at bay. And Munguia looked huge compared to Canelo in that fight.
You just do that for fun, right? But no, the Canelo fanboys are just crazy. They don't have...
Well, I agree with that. A lot of Canelo Alvarez fanboys are crazy. And so is the Terence Crawford fan base. And that's not me just trying to deflect it off of the Terence Crawford fan base, but any major fan base. And Canelo was looked at as boxing royalty. He's someone that is debated by many, or at least by some, as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. We all know that, first of all, not only the Mexicans and the Mexican fan base, that they're crazy about their boxing, but of course, when they take a look at someone as great as Canelo Alvarez, we all know that, of course, they take a look at them as boxing royalty. So they're going to be put on a whole nother level. That also being stated, Terence Crawford, he has overall an annoying-ass fan base as well. Because anytime I've said, or I've heard anyone say something critical about Crawford, but, overall could be something that could be somewhat truthful, or something that, could be provided with some sort of evidence or proven, the Terence Crawford fan base are always like, why are you hating on a black fighter for? Why you cooning? Why you doing this? Terence Crawford, people just always discredit him. It's always another thing to discredit Terence Crawford. People discredit his resume all the time, all sort of stuff. And listen, I get it. Some people do discredit Terence Crawford. But the truth is about Terence Crawford is that he is an all-time grade level fighter, but he is someone that does not have the best of resumes compared to some other all-time grade level fighters, including Canelo. And Terence Crawford knows it. That's why when Canelo said that thing about his resume, he got a little bit sensitive about it. It is what it is. That's why Crawford, he's had a chip on his career for his whole entire career, but whenever someone mentions his resume, he knows deep down that no one's going to take a look 20 years later on down the line and say, do you remember when he beat Jose Benavidez? Or when he beat Aegis Velasquez or Jeff Horn or Julius Indongo? No one cares. No one cares about those guys. But people will remember Canelo Alvarez's fights over Danny Jacobs and Golovkin and Lara and Kovalev and Saunders, and Smith and Plant. They'll remember those fights. And I'm not claiming that every single one of those fighters are all-time grade level fighters, but all those fighters that I just mentioned are at least on the A grade level, A minus to something else. Terence Crawford, as I've already stated, has only fought about 5 A grade level fighters. I give him Victor Postol, I give him Yuriorkis Gamboa, I give him Errol Spence, I give him Sean Porter, and I give him Israel Madrimov. Those are really the only 5 A grade level fighters. And to be quite honest with you, we really don't know how good Israel Madrimov even is. He may not even beat the likes of Sebastian Fondora or that of Amirta Zaliev or whatever that one Russian fighter's name is. Amirta Zaliev or whatever the fuck his name is. Y'all know what the fuck I'm talking about. The guy who knocked out Tim Tszyu in like 4 rounds. Whooped that man's ass. I apologize. Bakram, whatever his name is. Anyway.
Sense when it comes to talking about Canelo Alvarez or critiquing Canelo Alvarez, because they just base everything off of emotion. They love Canelo, right? But when I was watching that fight, like I said, the body work stuck out to me. How fast he faded. He was done, really fatigued around round 7, round 8.
So if Canelo Alvarez was done or faded by round 7 or round 8, how did he win the fight on 2 of the judges' scorecards? 8 rounds to 4 and 9 rounds to 3. Something to me is not adding up. Because Jaime Munguia was the guy that probably won 2 out of the first 3 rounds and had the faster start. So the fact that Canelo Alvarez, quote-unquote, faded out against Munguia, something's not adding up here. And then on top of that, Canelo Alvarez landed 50% of his power punches and landed 44% of his punches overall. Something's not adding up.
The trigger on, certain punches.
And in no way am I claiming that Canelo Alvarez did not maybe show signs of slowing down. But to just claim that he was faded, like, come on. And then on top of that, to just assume that this is going to happen against Terence Bud Crawford. Canelo Alvarez didn't even get faded against a guy that was probably 20 plus pounds bigger than him, overall in Jaime Munguia, a guy that could legit punch, and I guarantee you punches harder than that of a Crawford, at least when you compare their natural size. And you expect Crawford overall to just go in there and knock Canelo Alvarez out because Munguia overall landed some certain body shots. I mean, even if Canelo did fade a little bit in that fight, I just don't know if it would be enough evidence to really support the theory that Crawford is going to be able to do the same thing.
Is that he was, letting go early part of the fight. His punches didn't have enough steam on him like they did early part of the fight.
Well, you could debate that they didn't have the same steam on them as what they did in the first part of the fight. But I mean, that's kind of expected, as the rounds go along. And then on top of that, overall, Canelo Alvarez still basically had to hold off this dude who was a decent amount bigger than him throughout the majority of the fight. Canelo Alvarez wasn't just going to overall throw all of his power in a lot of his shots. I mean, you could debate that they didn't have the same level of steam on them if you want to, but he still overall, once again, was able to land 50% of his power shots, and keep Jaime Munguia at bay. If Canelo Alvarez just had completely faded out, there was no way that he would have won that fight the way that Jaime Munguia was coming after him. And he didn't just win the fight, like, he won it clearly.
He faded quick.
Right, he faded quick, but he won the fight 9 rounds to 3. Please explain that to me, sir.
So when I was watching this, I was like, man, all Crawford has to do is pretty much the game plan originally in my mind, if I'm thinking about this fight, how it's going to play out, right? I had Crawford winning by decision and boxing, just using his IQ, his boxing ability to win this fight for him, right?
That's mainly what these boxing casuals mainly say about how Terence Bud Crawford is going to win the fight. He's going to win off of switch hitting. He's going to win off of his boxing IQ. Like, this is the same shit that I always hear from these Terence Bud Crawford fans, or these people that assume that Terence Bud Crawford is going to win the fight. I mean, don't get it twisted. Crawford has an amazing boxing level IQ, but when you only give me those two factors about, oh, he's a switch hitter, he's someone that's very adaptable, he's someone that has a high level boxing IQ, all you're really telling me is that you don't know what specific factors, is going to really win Terence Bud Crawford the fight. It's great to say that someone has a great boxing IQ, but what makes Terence Bud Crawford have a high boxing IQ?
Boxing in spots, moving out, using your footwork, using your reach, go in there, throw a combination, and get out. Kind of similar to what Mayweather did, right? But one thing that people are not talking about, right? In terms of, if you're talking about Terence Crawford's ability as a fighter, right? One of the most common things that gets underrated is his body work. The dude is a vicious body puncher. If you watch,
he definitely is, but I'm not really quite sure who would really underrate that. I think anyone who watches Terence Bud Crawford, I think they know that he's a very vicious body puncher. Crawford also debatably has the best left uppercut to the body that I've ever seen.
Watch him in the Sean Porter fight, the Jeff Horn fight, the Madrimov fight, even against Spence. He's always had these body shots that they snap. And it has something to do with, him having long arms. They're just like whipping shots. But he is a vicious.
Terence Bud Crawford's reach definitely can be an advantage, but sometimes it also puts him into a little bit of trouble. And the reason why I state that is because you can tell at times when a fighter, when they rely a lot on that long reach, and at times they don't put their hands back up in order to kind of defend well. Now, to be fair, Crawford kind of gets hit, very early on in the fight. And then later on during the fight, he usually defends a lot better. But he's not going to be able to make that mistake against Canelo. Canelo is someone that if he lands flush on Terence Bud Crawford, especially right on that chin, there's a very good chance that Crawford may go to sleep. I'm not saying that it's a confirmation, but there's a higher probability that Canelo can sleep Crawford than vice versa. Just in my personal view of it. But, we'll see what ends up happening. But that being stated, overall, Crawford is someone that usually defends a little bit better. But you can tell that although he's an excellent, judger of range, he is someone that at times will kind of keep his chin a bit too high up in the air, and someone that when he exchanges, he kind of does not judge the distance quite as well, at least in the earlier rounds, as what you may think, which costs him to get hit quite a bit, especially with right hands or lead hands. So he needs to be very careful.
body puncher. And I think a lot of people, don't really, talk about that. But also, not a lot of people have targeted Canelo's body. Jaime Munguia did it, and, in the Bivol fight too, Bivol was, landing straight rights to the body. And I think that had a lot to do with, Canelo fading in that fight. But
Well, Canelo might have had the worst stamina that I've ever seen him have in that of the Dimitri Bivol fight, but it's just so hard for me to think that Crawford is going to make Canelo Alvarez look like that in terms of the stamina, because I just don't think that there's anything physically that Crawford can do that is going to make Canelo Alvarez tire out to that degree, even if Canelo Alvarez does have to chase him and gets frustrated. But the thing is that I just don't know how Crawford is going to make Canelo Alvarez fade like that. I mean, I've seen the fight against Jamel Charlo, and Charlo is someone that's like really a natural middleweight. I guarantee more than likely that Jamel Charlo probably has more punching power than that of a Terence Bud Crawford. And Jamel Charlo looked like he walked right into a brick wall. Like he wasn't able to do anything effective in that fight whatsoever, even when he did try to land.
ultimately, now how I see this fight going, I see Crawford, boxing, using his feet, still throwing combinations and getting out of the way, but attacking the body a lot more.
He's going to have to. That being stated, what I will personally state is this: Canelo Alvarez is a great defensive fighter. And for whatever reason, every boxer gets in the ring against Canelo Alvarez, even when they're the best of the best, other than really Mayweather and Bivol. A lot of these other boxers have really tried to go to the body as well, but for whatever reason, they never end up going to the body after the first few rounds. Same with Gennady Golovkin, same with Danny Jacobs, same with Caleb Plant, same with a lot of those guys. They always try to go to Canelo Alvarez's body at first, but oftentimes the reason why that is because, Canelo's counterpunching ability has usually been extraordinary.
I think if he goes to the body early, I think by the, eighth, ninth round, he's going to be gassed. He's going to be gassed. Now, there's still some question marks, right? In terms of people talking about this fight, and that's what makes one of these things, it makes this fight so intriguing, is because there are a lot of questions, right? But I have a strong feeling that Terence Crawford's power is going to translate to 168.
I think that his power may translate to a certain degree, but I don't think that it's going to be anywhere near as effective as what certain Terence Bud Crawford fans think that it's going to be. I just have a hard time believing that Canelo's someone that has been able to beat power punchers, the likes of Golovkin, Danny Jacobs, Kovalev, and even other guys, Jaime Munguia. I'm sorry, but there's just no way logically you can tell me that any of those guys punch harder, or that Terence Bud Crawford punches harder than any of those guys, especially for his size. Maybe for his weight class he does, but for being a 168 pounder or trying to go all the way up to that weight class, no. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. Punching as hard as Edgar Berlanga or something like that, no.
Seen him, training for this fight.
Now, that being stated, Terence Bud Crawford is someone that, of course, obviously is a very sharp puncher, and someone that, his level of power maybe could translate a bit better because, sometimes the punches you don't see coming or the level of intelligence behind your shots, they definitely can have more of an effect. But I just, I don't know how much that's really going to come to fruition. Even Canelo Alvarez overall against certain guys like Dimitri Bivol and some of those other guys, Canelo's someone that he's never been knocked down, let alone stopped. So I don't see how that's going to happen, but we'll see.
Some of the pictures I posted about, his physique, how he's looking going into this fight. He looks ripped, even at 168. Now, who knows if he comes in right at the weight limit, right? But he looks trimmed. He looks muscled up. He doesn't look blown up. He doesn't look like he just put on size, and it's not good size. He looks well trimmed, well ready for this fight, for this debut at 168. So I'm going to imagine that he's going to get Canelo's respect pretty early.
He's going to basically have to, because if he does not get Canelo Alvarez's respect early, and if the fight overall ends up going past the fourth or the fifth round, especially if we see Canelo Alvarez start to just run over Terence Bud Crawford by the time the fifth or the sixth round happens, and it starts looking like the Jamel Charlo fight, Crawford is going to be in some deep problems, or he's going to be in some deep trouble. But we'll see.
I know Canelo's got this great chin, but one thing that a lot of people, in the media, certain boxing, media members are talking about is Crawford is a sharp puncher, right? He's not a slow, load him up type of power puncher like Golovkin where everything is telegraphed.
Well, I think that that's really a little bit more of a narrative. That tells me that this guy's a little bit more of a casual, quote unquote boxing analyst. Just because Gennady Golovkin is someone that is slower and a little bit more of a power puncher doesn't mean that Gennady Golovkin telegraphs with all of his punches, which is why Gennady Golovkin had such a terrific jab, because he's someone that has a lot of snap behind it and he doesn't really have a lot of tell behind this jab. And he's also someone that he's very clearly slower than Crawford, of course, and also Canelo, but he's not someone that just loads up on every shot. Some, like this is what I mean overall when I talk about casuals or people that they think they know boxing analysis, but they really don't. Because they'll take a look at a power puncher or someone that's a pressure fighter, and they'll just say, oh, one-dimensional fighter or someone that loads up on their shots just because they're a pressure fighter. Not everyone's a Deontay Wilder.
Even Munguia was telegraphed. John Ryder, Edgar Berlanga, right? Those guys, yeah, they may have had some pop, but you're going to see those punches coming from a mile away. Not with Crawford. Crawford is a slick counterpuncher. And when he lets his combinations go, they're quick, they're sharp, and sometimes he's going to land a shot that you're not going to be able to see.
Right, and I guarantee you more than likely that so is Canelo Alvarez.
Right? Look at Jose Benavidez. Hit him with an uppercut he did not see coming.
That's great, but once again, to me, there's only so much relevance I can really give that fight, and it's not that I'm trying to discredit Terence Bud Crawford, but to me, it's like, who really cares? It's like, no offense, but Jose Benavidez was someone that very obviously his leg was bothering him in that fight. And then on top of that, like even Jose Benavidez at his absolute best, like he's not really that good of a fighter. He's someone overall that, I mean, at his absolute best, I don't even know what level to put him on. I think that he's about a B plus even at his absolute best.
He was taking some good shots throughout the fight, but the one he didn't see is what hurt him. So I'm just now how I'm seeing this fight go. Crawford boxing him, going to the body, wearing him out, and possibly getting him out late. And along the way, frustrating Canelo, because if Canelo doesn't have his opponent standing just right in front of him, he's not going to be able to land. And
well, Canelo has a little bit more difficulty with fighters that really love to use their feet, but he is someone that can adjust to a certain degree. It's not like he's someone that, I think is going to look like Julio Cesar Chavez in the Pernell Sleepy Whitaker fight. He can adjust to a certain degree. That's why he was able to beat certain fighters like Lara and Saunders and Caleb Plant. Of course, not without issues, but, still. And on top of that, Crawford is someone that is more comparable in size to Canelo than some of the guys that he's also been facing. Especially comparative to that of a William Skull or a Kovalev or a Saunders. So, I mean, to state overall that, if these guys move that Canelo can't land, I mean, that's not entirely accurate. I mean, to state that he has problems with guys that know how to use their feet, yeah, that'd be accurate. But to just claim that Canelo can't land at all, no.
Not punching while the other guy's punching anymore. There's no more Canelo, punching in between the punches. It's straight.
He definitely overall doesn't do a whole lot of that anymore, which may cost him the fight. Now, Canelo still does punch in between the shots when he needs to, but hopefully overall his his offense definitely is a little bit more predictable than what it used to be. Probably a lot more predictable, to be honest with you. But Canelo, I still think, can mix it up when he needs to. It's just he hasn't really needed to mix it up quite as much as of lately. But I do believe he will try to against Crawford. I think that he's taking this fight very, very seriously. But we'll see what Canelo Alvarez can do.
Defense or straight offense. There's no in between.
Actually, the point that he brought up there, I don't actually think is the worst point. Canelo Alvarez is someone that at times when he does move, sometimes he can move a little bit too much and not really throw in between the spaces or the shots. Sometimes Canelo can do that, especially in the latter part of his career. That being stated, let me also state this about Crawford. Crawford can also do that a little bit as well. Crawford also sometimes can kind of back up in a straight line a little bit too much and get up against the ropes. He's someone that I believe also has great lateral movement, and I believe that he'll use more of that, but he does need to be careful, because even against Errol Spence was still able to get him to the ropes quite a lot. It's just that he wasn't able to be effective because Crawford tied him up so efficiently. Anyway.
right? But no, you hear all the Canelo fans right now saying he's going to knock Crawford out. When is the last time Canelo knocked anybody out?
Right, but once again, this is this to me overall is telling me that you're not really getting the situation. I'm not, once again, I understand, overall, well, when's the last time Canelo knocked somebody out? Right, but when's the last time Canelo Alvarez fought someone that was around the natural 147 pounder? That's 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 the problem overall here. We seen him against Jamel Charlo. Jamel Charlo, in my view, I mean, he moved up from 154, but he's not really a natural 154 pounder. He's really more of a 160 pounder in my view. He looks like he's dehydrating at the very fucking least at 170 to 175. At his fights at 154, there is no way that he's a natural 154 pounder. And Jamel Charlo, I believe, had never been knocked down once in his career. Was looked at as a great power puncher for his division. He fought Canelo Alvarez, and his punches looked like sponges. They didn't even overall look like they were effective whatsoever. And then on top of that, Canelo Alvarez landed a punch, wasn't even completely flush, and he was able to knock Charlo down for the first time in his career.
The other things you're hearing are, oh, he's got Jerome Boots Ennis in his camp now. That don't matter. Jerome Boots Ennis.
Well, it definitely matters to a certain degree. It's definitely going to prepare Canelo Alvarez for certain styles. You you can tell that this dude overall, that A, that he's a Terence Crawford fanboy, and B, he does not like Canelo Alvarez that much. You can tell just with his tone. Like, that don't matter.
Not a Terence Crawford. And if you really want to, dive deep into that, it looks like he's getting beat up in sparring. Dude's posting pictures with lumps on his forehead.
Right, but I mean, can we really rely on that? How many times have we heard overall, apparently, allegedly, this happening in sparring and this happening in sparring with no evidence whatsoever? Then the fight finally happens and the result ends up completely differently. I remember when Dante's Boxing Nation and some of these guys, they were talking all this shit about how Tyson Fury was allegedly ducking Dillian White because Dillian White allegedly had knocked him out in sparring and all this other bullshit. Then the fight happens. Fury wins every single round. Dillian White gets so frustrated he has to resort to every dirty tactic in the book by elbowing Tyson Fury in the face, hitting behind the head, and also headbutting and all this other shit. Then Tyson Fury knocks his dirty ass out within 6 rounds. Dillian White, by the way, is someone that, when you take a look at it, he's just not someone that you can really like personally, at least in terms of the boxing ring. Like, he's a dirty bastard. Dillian White's one of these guys that always loves to make excuses about how he gets shortchanged and how these guys aren't good people. Like, I remember when he fought AJ Anthony Joshua, when he tried to hit AJ Anthony Joshua in the corner, because I think AJ, landed a slight punch, either right at the bell or right after the bell. Like, Dillian White is so unlikable. That dude is really a piece of shit, to be quite honest with you. Anyway.
Closed. It's not looking too good. In any training footage I've seen thus far, he looks slow, flat.
And I remember, of course, the sparring champion of the world. Let me not forget Martin McCauley allegedly beating up Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk and Danny Dubois in training. Then, of course, we take a look at him in his most recent fights. And I'm not claiming that he did not overall do maybe well in sparring. But once again, when we talk about these quote-unquote stories in sparring, we don't know what necessarily is happening there. And Canelo looked a little bit marked up, but we don't even know what those marks were caused by. We don't even know if they were from Jerome Boots Ennis. So, I mean, anyway.
It is always, it doesn't look like the intensity is there. You look at Crawford, on the other hand, the dude's climbing mountains in training camp, working hard, really motivated to win this fight. I don't know.
Right, that's great, but Canelo Alvarez is also super motivated to win this fight. There's no offense against this dude, but pretty much all the points that he's brought up, in my view, are pretty easily disprovable.
If you guys seen, yesterday they did the send-off, celebration thing for Crawford in Omaha, alongside a bunch of other interviews and stuff like that, right? But Team Crawford is very confident they're going to go get the job done.
Well, as they should be. Terence Crawford is someone that is undefeated and someone overall that in his biggest fights has always rise to the occasion. So, of course, he very well should be. That being stated, what I will personally state is this. I don't think Crawford is quite as confident as what certain people believe. Because I believe even at one point in time, Crawford said something that he believes there's about a 70% chance that he'll win this fight. And, of course, many people will say, well, that's a, overwhelming percentage. But for those of us that are very competitive or know how a lot of these professional athletes think, and I'm not claiming that I'm a pro athlete or anything, but I do know how a certain amount of them think, because I've been studying a certain amount of pro athletes for years, and I understand a certain amount of the psychology of them. When a pro athlete says that there's a 70% chance that they're going to win a fight, and they're on the level and the confidence level of a Terence Bud Crawford, that's really almost more like a 50 or a 35% chance. So Terence Bud Crawford realizes that this is a huge fight and that this is probably going to be the most challenging fight of his career.
Crawford saying, I'm going to go in there and prove him wrong. You know, he hears all the BS that these YouTubers say, all the critics say. He knows everything that you guys say. He sees it.
Right, but once again, this is another fanboy, talking point. Terence Bud Crawford hears all this shit that you're saying. You can't break Bud, bro. You can't break Bud. I don't care how powerful you are, you can't break him. He has the heart and the will. All that, all that is a bunch of bullshit that isn't gonna win you the fight. I'm not claiming overall that Crawford can't win the fight, but let's keep this bullshit out of it about Crawford hears over all the critics and all this other stuff. Yeah, that's great. So does Canelo Alvarez. Canelo sees a whole bunch of boxers that are picking Crawford to win the fight. He feels disrespected. Trust me, Canelo Alvarez is very motivated to win this fight.
But he uses it as fuel. He's wanting to go in there and prove all you guys wrong, right? To quote him, he's like, I'm going to make them all go home crying, right? I did some YouTube shorts of Bomac, too, talking about this fight, saying they're going to whoop him.
Right, well, now I'm convinced. Bomac said it, Terence Bud Crawford's head trainer. Now I got to pick Terence Bud Crawford in my prediction.
That power is going to fade. That power is not going to sustain him. He's going to be tired by around 6 or 7. So, I don't know, man. The closer we get to this fight, the more I'm starting to lean toward a Crawford, stoppage. I was already picking Crawford to win this fight. Wasn't really thinking a stoppage was so likely, but man, I'm starting to really feel like Crawford's going to stop. And we're going to hear a bunch of excuses, right? So I don't want to hear any of them. Because this dude brought in boots. He should be highly motivated, right, to win this fight. He brought in, right?
Right, but you just said that boots don't matter. Anyway.
The guy that Crawford avoided, quote-unquote avoided, his, guy
Yeah, you can tell this dude is a major Terence Bud Crawford fan.
who's so similar to him in style, who's bigger, he should be able to handle Crawford on fight night then, right? And Crawford ain't fought nobody, so I just can't wait. I honestly cannot wait. But those are my thoughts, man. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you have winning this fight? And can you see Terence Crawford stopping Canelo Alvarez? Let me know. Hate, like, comment, subscribe.
No, personally, I cannot see him winning this fight by stoppage. Just my personal view. I could see him winning this fight, but the only way that, to be quite honest with you, I see Terence Bud Crawford winning this fight is in similar fashion to what a Sugar Ray Leonard did over Marvin Hagler. That's really about it. Maybe with Terence Crawford backing up Canelo a bit more, because sometimes Canelo is someone that, can, be backed up a bit, if he's forced, into cruise control a little bit more. But other than that, do I see Canelo legitimately getting stopped over Crawford? No. But we'll see what ends up happening. Like I said, I could be wrong, and, not everyone gets their fight predictions right 100% of the time, of course. Nobody does. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I still have Canelo winning this fight. Would I be surprised if Crawford won? No, because he's an all-time great level fighter. And Canelo is someone that at times does have problems with fighters that are slick boxers, especially that have great feet. And on top of that, he is a bit older. So we'll see what happens. But, and I've already stated that I do believe that Canelo has the more wear and tear between the two fighters. But we'll see what happens. But that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.